rather than tossing them, I have another idea. Might try something this summer. Just rainy day activities.
Yes, we need them. Keep us engaged. All right, well, I think we should probably get started, if that's okay with Marcelin and Andrew and all the students. People can float in and out, but hopefully our core 8 stays with us. But we're happy to have all of the eyes and ears of all the other students, and feel free to. This is an open forum. I'm only a facilitator, I would say, but I think everyone who's listening to these presentations is sort of equal and welcome to give comments, suggestions, references, things that come to your mind that might help your peers, make them see something in a different way, help them see your perspective on something. I think we've been doing this for a while, so I think most of you understand the live chat, or at least the premise of it. But I think it's meant to, in some ways, kind of be akin to if you would walk by someone's desk in studio. You'd be like, hey, what are you excited about? What are you working on? What's giving you trouble? What's your next step? And so I think in the live chats, I haven't seen all of them, but the ones that I've seen, the students have taken those different approaches to not share the entire project. I think each student should, just take a minute or two, but you're kind of giving us a glimpse on something that you might want some feedback on.
I think I'm still in the wrong room.
Oh my, okay. Well, we still have Ferris, so.
Should I rejoin, or what should I do right now?
What's the problem? Is someone in?
I should be in the other room.
Oh, okay, I'll move you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. With 2 accounts.
Hi, Lynn.
Yeah,
nice to see you.
How are
Anyway.
you?
Okay, great. So Priyanka, do you want to take the screen?
Yeah, sure. I could share.
Okay, and then we have 4. So maybe we'll do like 10 to 12 minutes per student. So if you kind of want to keep your presentation to just a few minutes for each of the students, that way we can ask questions and make comments.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, awesome. Take it away.
So my project is called the Blink Brink. It's a spatial investigation of superimposition of gridded spatial layers, which cause a sort of ambiguity and also a sort of perception in depth. And so I investigate certain qualities of the brink, so materiality, circulation, the entrance quality, and also how it sits on the ground. So these are some of the diagrams I did to represent that, and also sort of like a formal exploration. And then wondering what if there were 2 of these that sat in the same space and how they would interact with each other. So my miniatures model explores this spatial ambiguity, where it's like a juxtaposition of layers, and also sort of like this ambiguous space where the plan and elevation look the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry. And then I'm designing a school in Chicago, and the site is near the University of Illinois Chicago campus. And I'm also trying to explore all of these spatial explorations on the site and how it fits into the context as well. And using all of those study drawings as a representation in my design proposal.
Okay, great.
Should I share the next person's, or how is it?
No, I'd say let's, well, I don't know. I haven't, I would say why don't we just spend 10 minutes talking about yours and then go to the next student? Okay. Or how's everyone feel about that? Is that okay? And then I think you can keep it. You can keep the screen. I would encourage other folks to speak up if you have a comment, but also if you have a thought and you don't want to speak up, you could put it into the Miro board, with a post-it note and maybe a link to something that you think might be useful for someone to look at. So I'll start as like a thought or an observation, Priyanka.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that seems really striking to me that I know you can't address everything that you're working on, but the fact that there's two of them, right? The doubling aspect of them. I'm curious, like how that works in the project. And I would say there's the doubling of how they sit on the site, right? And they seem to have kind of a shared relationship with one another. But then also the section seems to be pretty important to you. And so one could also say there also seems to be kind of a doubling in terms of what's underground and what's above ground. And that seems also interesting because one would have the effects, I would guess, more on the exterior, whereas once it goes underground, those things might shift the priority to the kind of internal spaces or internal surfaces.
I think like the doubling becomes an interesting space because I'm also talking about the entrance, and that would become like the main focus. Like that would be like almost like the brink. And then if you see this drawing, it almost like folds into each other. Like you can see like it folds into each other. So this becomes like this in-between space where like relation between the building, which is functional versus the non-functional parts of the building as well, and just like additional facade detailing. But then what if like the entrance was through that? So it almost becomes like the threshold where like you don't know whether you're inside and outside. So I'm also looking at those relations.
Well, then that sounds really exciting. I think that then a reference I would maybe recommend would be I think it's the Pennzoil Tower in Texas by Johnson, where there it's like the proportion is different, but it's kind of two towers, and then the atrium is the only thing that links the two towers, and the kind of geometry of that entry is pretty stunning. I'll add it to Miro for you to check out later.
Thank you.
I think it's Pennzoil Place.
Priyanka, are you imagining that at least the materiality image, that slide that you have up, like reminds me of kind of like a lenticular image or something like that? Are you imagining that there's a possibility of like the grids being read differently from one side to the other? Is like that part of something you're exploring?
So what I was looking at, if you see the elevation drawing, it almost looks like the grid it follows through the same. But if you look at the object itself, like the grid changes. So it creates like this perception of depth, almost like making it look really flat in different views. And I think that would be like an interesting quality to bring about. And then like the materiality would change to the inside and how it would react to the exterior itself. Because in some parts it would be like much closer to the facade, whereas some parts of it would be occupiable, the negative space between the two volumes itself. So all of those relations will like it probably be like constantly varying, and it would bring in a lot of like layers to this design proposal.
I think that's really cool. I might be projecting because I'm currently working on tectonics in my project, but
Yeah.
I think it'll also, because these are like such like large strips, or at least it seems that they're probably, if you're interested in taking it in this way, to like think about how it would be panelized, probably, and how actually like some sort of like material reality might create like like a micro version of this, like
Yeah,
on
this
the
is
scale of
this
the
is my
tile?
miniatures model, so it's not going to be a true representation into my building. I'm working on like different patterns and like different porosities and also different kind of layering, like even volumetrically, not just surface treatment. So yeah, it's still in progress.
Cool.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
They're kind of these two independent objects, and I really like how actually one of the grid axes is global. Like one of the axes of the lines cuts both objects on the same plane. Can you talk about how things relate and if that needs to be more explicit?
Yeah, so again, I have like a lot to figure out, and I'm still like exploring how to convert like these 2D drawings into an actual form. And in this, you see I have like this spatial plane that almost like looks like a 3D representation of the circulation diagram and how it connects both of these objects individually. And I think there will be like certain parts that connect more fluidly, like even on the ground plane, but I haven't like explored that yet. And these are just like starting diagrams for me to figure out how to come about the form.
Is the role of the school going to be like how school is compartmentalized, or not, the opposite, you know, a school that's maybe going to go more to an open version? There seems to be a lot of interesting zones for like primary volumes and then kind of poche to the perimeter or around it, below it, above it. How much is the school as a program and as a place with certain types of spatial needs impacting you at the moment?
I haven't really got down to the details of the interiors yet, but like so far, like I know like the school also has like large programmatic functions versus smaller spaces like classrooms. And at the moment, what I was thinking was the negative space between the two volumes would be like a more private space, which would be like classrooms and like studios, versus the interior space being like the more prominent public function, which would be like the auditorium and like the multipurpose spaces in the gymnasium. So that's what I was going with, because yeah, that's where I am at, but I haven't like got into the nitty gritty of it, which would probably change as I like start like exploring that aspect.
Yeah, it just seems so like the section, like even if you weren't quite ready for it everywhere, that I think like just starting to overlay options over that section, like even if you did the first version, which you're thinking of, which is maybe like the one that we'd go to, which is like large spaces, large volume, compartmentalized spaces, packed into spaces. But maybe you just kind of quickly would do the one that would be the total opposite of that. Just to see like, what would it look like if I like actually pack the large volume and then, you know, try to take a larger space and break it into smaller pieces or something. I mean, I think it's interesting to be doing a thesis right now. I think a lot of programs that we made a lot of assumptions about, like open space versus closed space, are up for potentially being rethought. I don't think everything needs to be rethought given the current climate, but it maybe, if nothing else, gives you an excuse to maybe like to get you started, like do what you were sort of initially thinking and then try the opposite of it. Yeah. Just to sort of, I think we can use the current moment as an excuse to be like, well, maybe schools need to be this way now.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep that in mind. Thank you.
Priyanka,
Oh,
I
go
was
ahead,
just
Marshall.
curious. Oh, did someone else try to talk? I can't see who's. Oh, because I think
Nope, go
I
ahead.
always think this is really a lot more for everybody. I know we're always like giving desk crits and stuff, but anyway, I just wanted to put in one short comment about the model. I think the miniatures model has some really compelling qualities. And I'm wondering, how are you thinking about the next step? Are you going to do a physical model for the midterm? And how might
Yeah,
that?
I most probably would, but I haven't got down to that yet. There's lots to like figure out in terms of like the spatial quality of like the forms itself. So I want to like get that to like an extent and then probably make the model.
Yeah, because I think something about the whole blink brink thesis and the graphic quality of those lines versus at what moments they become tectonic and how they start to maybe delaminate from the surface. I think that'll be fascinating to see, you know, how you treat that in the model, what your choices are.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I really like where two corners come and meet, like at the edges of the building. How those particular areas really confound where like the interior of the, like the indoor and the outdoor, you know, you really can't tell. I mean, I was like, I guess, kind of Crown Hall's kind of like that. I mean, when you move to the corner from the outside and you're looking now through two plates of glass, and there's the trees all around it, it kind of, it's very abstract in terms of just the corners really layer into the side, you know, and kind of Koolhaas's building kind of does that too, how it reflects the forest back. Like the glass has a lot to do with the site.
Yeah, those are two good references, Andrew, particularly because Priyanka, your context is, those buildings are kind of, you know, not adjacent context, but cultural context or within the context of the city.
Well, there's something about the density of the perforation in the Koolhaas. Like it almost seems like it's referencing Crown Hall to me. You know, trying to recreate the trees on that side of the site, on its side of the site. That just in terms of density.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Priyanka.
Thank you.
Again, the Miro is open. The Post-its are there. Feel free. I know that it kind of goes fast, so if you think of an example for anyone or something, feel free to put the comments there. Okay, we'll go to the next student, Reza. Are you ready?
Should I stop sharing or should I share their screen?
Yeah.
I think you can stop sharing. Reza can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can share again. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Reza, and this is my project. Every year in a specific time in Iraq, a pilgrimage will be held, and 22 million people, mostly Shia from Iran and Iraq, participate in that. My project is about this pilgrimage. Relationship between aggregation and individual is something like a role of bits in a digital system, and potential of aggregation to make a larger form is leveraged in this project according to the discrete logic. There are three precedents in this project: Isfahan Bazaar, calligraphy, and Karvansaray. Isfahan Bazaar as a aggregation of building that shaped a route will taken as a precedent, and this aggregation of building shaped this route from 2 points in the old Isfahan, and its component maintained their own identity during this route. Also, calligraphy as a second precedent I will use calligraphy and make a new language based on the historical form of calligraphy, and with applying these new forms by some software techniques like extrusion, Boolean difference, and others, I made these forms. I try to use from calligraphy not just democracy, just I lost the word. Not just as an ornament. Also, I want to use calligraphy in the tectonic role, as in the history of Islamic architecture it happened. Also, Caravanserai as a third precedent is a quality that people during a journey can share their experience together in there. So based on these three, I try to combine the form that I made by calligraphy and combine them to make these sample of more complex form, to have forms that represent quality of Caravanserai. For the miniature, I had these two models and these renderings that show the quality of shadows that I have on these forms that I made based on calligraphy. And here you can see the whole route between two cities in Iraq, from Najaf to Karbala. I have these 2 points, number 1 and 2, that these complex form will be placed here. And in the point A, B, C, I have smaller form to support the population of these pilgrimage. And the rectangular forms will be something like a bridge that people can have a different point of view from the aggregation of people on in a different level, and they can see the aggregation of people in the on the above and have a different experiences. So for in the next step, for the midterm, I will try to have a facade system, and also I will apply the program in these forms, all the program that I need. And in the first step of the future work, I try to, again, from history, represent the quality of lighting that there are in Islamic architecture. And it's just a first step that I tried, and it's not completely successful, but I will try more for that, to have some screen quality to represent this lighting quality.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Reza.
Hi, how are you, Sadvi?
I'm good, how are you?
Good.
I think it's really compelling how you're translating calligraphy into three-dimensional architectural forms. And I'm looking at your density diagrams in the top left.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that this is population. This is
yes.
This is the general flow of human beings during this particular event. And I'm wondering if these characters that you've created, if there's a certain strategy to aggregating these characters, to if there's like an aggregation strategy in your final form.
Yes, actually, I will try to have, again, in the next step, I will try to have some more forms that I try to fill it by some forms like people or something like that, to show the aggregation of people between the spaces of these aggregation of buildings. So I will combine these two together.
I was also thinking about the diagrams of the flows of people, Sadhvi, in relation to like maybe handwriting and like the different iterations of the same like grouping of letters.
Like,
and maybe
like
how that's, yeah, like,
mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll go to the Miro again. Like these diagrams here are like so many different people. And then this is these diagrams up here where you're changing the letter or like, and how the way that you represent like all the figures are the same black dot, and the way that you're representing these letters is like 3 iterations. It's just like a computational way of kind of diversifying like a same sort of asset group. Or I'm just wondering how you might continue to like build difference into like the representations.
Actually, I wanted to use these forms of calligraphy to make my forms, and after that, the aggregation of these forms represent the quality of caravanserai. So based on the quality of caravanserai, I have some spaces that aggregation of people will be held on those spaces. So these two will be mixed together as a kind of, if I be right in here.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm really struck by the plan, well, the plan references that you have, like the courtyard, the one in the upper right. Oh, sorry, I should probably get there. Exactly. You know, I think I just, my own bias, sort of have a fascination with plans like that, where, you know, the perimeter becomes super dense, and then the courtyards and just the different types of solid and void, et cetera. I think that I find it intriguing. But what's interesting about that is the relationship to the calligraphy diagrams that you did, and how awesome they really show like the different ways of how, you know, I start to see like corridors and courtyards and little niches and pockets of space and things like that. So, I mean, and you addressed it that way. Maybe I'm just putting my bias there. I would, as you're starting to add pattern and texture and think about things, you're focusing a lot on the mass. And I would occasionally, you know, flip it and maybe like what happens if the screen would happen across multiple surfaces, but to define an interior space instead of an exterior space, or to define an in-between space, right? So there might be some moments within your overall massing which maybe have very little texture. But then, I don't know, I could imagine turning a corner and then going down a corridor that has like an excessive amount of texture. You know, and that you could kind of calibrate that surprise so that it doesn't, you know, so that it doesn't always become something that's expected, or that it becomes kind of indexed in a way that, okay, this is the exterior, this is the facade, this is where pattern goes, but that you really just sort of see that as a palette, and maybe go back. And I think when you see those calligraphy diagrams that you have, we don't yet give a hierarchy to like what's inside or what's outside, or what surface of that stroke is more important or less important. So that might help us to, we often have a bias towards the exterior over the interior, and that might help.
Okay, yeah, good suggestion. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Hi, Riza. I don't know if you've seen this project. It's not yet built, but it's by Zaha's office. It's called Stone Towers in Cairo. I think you should probably have a look at it because I think the sort of like your modes of operating with the calligraphy and like sort of how you extend that as a planning strategy or even a formal strategy. And lots of your sort of like your modes of working, like from the facade to the planning and the typology, like is sort of like you can draw like parallel aspects to that project where she's done like similar things, and she's used like the whole calligraphy as a there's also a performative aspect to it because of the typology, and she has like parallel lines coming in, but yours is more like a courtyard. So maybe looking into that project, you could find like some.
Sure. Thank you for your suggestion. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Reza. And
Thank
if
you.
anyone has any other thoughts, feel free to, yeah, put those references there. That was a good one, Kumaran. Okay. Next up is Yi Yang.
Yeah, that's me.
Did I say that correct?
Hi.
Okay, great.
Okay, so share screen with you.
Oh yeah, Reza, you might have to, thanks.
Yeah,
Yep,
that's good.
great.
Okay, can you see that?
Yep, great.
Okay, so first of all, like we're teamwork. This is my partner, Sue. Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
So our project name is the Boogie Complex. We start with the idea that we think that currently those kind of housing apartment was restricted into B2B, 3B, 2B, those kind of combinations of bedrooms and bathrooms. It was restricted and kind of limitations. So what we want to kind of achieve is kind of to find a potential if we can build different variety of those kind of combinations in downtown LA. Starting with the idea of Boogie Woogie, one of the paintings that made by Mandarin. Those colorful paintings with squares and lines, divided space. I think you all know that, so I didn't put that in mirror. We start with the patterns, kind of using ideas to create our new housing unit. And first we have to experiment on those housing units with different function zones.
Yep. So starting with the pattern study, we simplify like 4 kind of like very specified housing units into like patterns. So we try to like do the studies both in 3D units and in 2D patterns, and to transfer from one housing unit to another gradually. So using this method to create many variations of housing units. So that's the result for our test. And up from these 2 big image, there are like 2 drawings we made from the bottom patterns.
So first we have experiment of our housing units. Then we combine all the units, all those potentials from like 1B, 1B to maybe like 6B, 4B, those kind of just numbers present different zoomed areas. So we combine them into an entire pattern, which would be it's kind of the bird view of our project. It's continuous, but all of the spaces is different. So the entire pattern could be divided into 3 catalogs or 3 layers. Black stands for the housing units. Gray stands for the semi-open space or the connections between different blocks. White means for the open public space, where also can be the voids of the entire form on site. And on the left side, this would be the first draft of our plan. As you can see, all those units, they changed into space. They are all different and they are continuous, using the same orientations, kind of combinations of the patterns. So that kind of create a new typology of how apartment and housing units combined into this city. And also we use some kind of like a post-parametric method to create those things. In the first 6 to 7 housing units, we kind of like using Grasshopper, like parametric ways to do that. But later we find that it's not so, like we don't like the units being so controlled by numbers. So we then transform to manually control the extensions of those units and and create our own patterns. So these two are the models for miniature and kind of like the math systems inside it. And this would be our site, which is the Piggy Backyard on the north part of SCI-Arc and right next to the Union stations. You can also see the site here. So this would be a 400 meters by 400 meters kind of this space, very huge space. We would like to testing our housing project in this area. Yep. That's mainly about this project. Thank you.
Pre-parametric and post-parametric times. Why did you take away the color drawing on the right? There was color in that one. It was way better.
Right,
we
right.
actually have one.
I've actually never seen the color version of this drawing, but it's my first time seeing this drawing. But I was actually going to say that I really liked it, like sort of density. But I can only assume that there's a color version that's equally as good. But yeah, I think the drawing on the right is just kind of provocative when I kind of look at it. It's very interesting. Just the overlap. I'm not too sure what the conditions are inside such a high density housing project. I believe what you said, how that is. I'm kind of curious how light would sort of seep through all these zones. I think the only thing I can think of, literally the only thing I can think of that reminds me of this project or something to look at, I forgot the name of it, but it was a sort of Morphosis project in Spain.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too, Irvin.
Yeah, and that sort of works itself in plan as well, or in my view, of course. I mean, Tom can probably have his own opinions on that, but and I kind of look by you designing in plan and showing us all these drawings from the top view. There's something being said about the strategy of sort of urban development. I think so. I think that's a project worth looking at because that also has effects. That also creates effects internally. So, even though you see such a high density thing from the top view, there's these really beautiful conditions where light just sort of seeps through, stripes and striations hit at the facade of certain units and things like that. So, yeah, I think it's really promising.
Yeah, it's the Madrid housing project.
Yes, the Madrid housing project. Yes.
Yeah, that's it's a really great example.
Yeah, I also thought of the Morphosis, but it's like the Morphosis, but chewed up again. It's like the Morphosis that you put through the blender and then reassembled. This project is so weird. I love it. I also really love this grayscale drawing because it really looks like the elevation of the cyberpunk project that I thought you guys were doing that I now see you're not. I thought that this was they do want to make LA into Blade Runner. This is what it looks like from the side. Here's all the different materials that are on it. It looks just like the Elisa building. And what's crazy is you don't even know if it's elevation or plan. And then the model, I'm yeah, there it is, standing up. And then I'm oh, you laid it down. That was interesting. But I see that it's a plan thing, the whole way. And then as it becomes a plan thing, that site, it's really interesting that it's post-parametric because it doesn't solve any of the, at least in the US, the histories of urban housing projects that are in terrible sites, bounded by freeways, inaccessible to meaningful stuff, and generally not handmade or reproduced. And so it's really interesting that it has this thing where it's yeah, I started with this grasshopper script and then I just went in and moved stuff around, which is a really interesting and sort of strange take on how one would approach a housing project that has scales and tectonics that we can't even imagine yet. It's really interesting and provocative.
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting about proposing dense sprawl in LA.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I've been doing a lot of like policy research about like transit-oriented communities, which is like a kind of thing that LA is both trying to push, and then SB 50 failed, and it's kind of complicated. But there's like the kind of reigning idea about LA urbanism and the way to get more housing is that we should be building higher around transit, and instead you're going like wide. And so I don't know, I feel like there should be some sort of, there's something to say about like, I don't know, is this actually like more LA because it's wide and not tall? Like, is this winning against everyone who like was like, I don't want this tall tower next to the metro? I don't know, there's something interesting about that.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, initially made me think of like the matte buildings, right? The which was of I think a certain time or certain cities that were looking to kind of densify in particular ways. So I think that's an interesting point, Christina. Which is why I wonder if like the Morphosis example isn't interesting. Like I wonder, could it ever pull up at certain points, or is it important that it has like that there's a maximum datum point?
Oh, that will be next stage. Well, like it's just the height and the volume of each part of the project.
All right.
More interesting than this for now.
I mean, this one's already pretty interesting. Don't get me wrong, pretty beautiful, but it's like abstractly, I think we're all starting to kind of imagine it in that site, and it might want to have some peaks. All right, any other comments? All right, well, thank you both of you. All right, the final one for this session is, did you want to say something, Andrew? No. I thought I saw your head lean forward. I'm like trying to learn my Zoom.
No. Listen, I really think this is like faculty awkward silence hour. It's
sure.
like,
Okay. Fair enough.
Don't take it as anything.
Okay.
I mean, I like to just listen to you guys.
Perfect.
You know, I'm going to be talking to all these guys for like 2 hours this afternoon, so I don't.
Okay.
But also even for other projects, I think it is nice for, you know.
Yeah, for sure. No, I really like this. I like seeing where everyone else is. Getting out of our own advising bubble and seeing the other projects is really great. So, all right, Irvin, if you want to kind of cap us off this afternoon, you can take the screen.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Just making sure. I always have mic issues.
I can hear you today, Irvin. No issues.
All right, pretty sick. So yeah, my name is Irvin, and my thesis is called Zealots of Compton. I'm sort of interested in a mode of working that introduces density as another mode in terms of revitalizing any parcel or any community. So when we sort of think about like space, essentially, we think of it sort of in reference to sort of math, like the X, Y, and Z planes, right? And the limitations of, you know, the site and how high can go, your setback, sort of any sort of zoning conditions. Those all in my thesis create what we consider the bounding box. So essentially, what in the practice of architecture, I'm saying that the bounding box, there's sort of two routes people tend to take. And that first route, of course, is seeing the bounding box as the object. So I'm giving, as an example, I'm giving you the tallest tower in Compton, which is a box, the Federal Court Yard House. And it's like, I'd say like 100 and something feet. I forgot the exact number. And then the other way, of course, is sort of multiple objects in the box. So if we consider the Federal Tower as the object, as being the box, then the other option would be putting multiple buildings inside of the bounding box. And I'm saying that when we think about architecture assisting in the revitalization of communities such as Compton, that it needs to be, that this other route needs to be incremental. and really driven by not only the context, but the projection of growth in that bounding box, which is what I'm introducing as the sort of zealot. So in sort of my, as you'd say, miniature, I have these I like dipped, I made this sort of resin box, which is, I mean, yeah. And then the sort of forms, the zealot forms, thrashing and dancing throughout the box. And and the O3 representing the amount. So this is a project that speaks on sort of density in a sense, but not in a way that aims to fill the box, but really make the box be perceived as full, or use as much of the box as possible in the long-term development of the parcel. So, and right now I'm sort of working on a barbershop, which would be, I'd say about 2 blocks away from the original box that I talked about, which was the Compton sort of courtyard house, courtyard or federal courtyard or whatnot. And this barbershop is extremely promising, by the way. It's probably the busiest barbershop on the street. And its bounding box is sort of limited not limited anymore, but at some point it was limited to a sort of RM zoning. What we, in LA, the sort of single family housing zoning, and then they sort of put a umbrella over it and say, oh, high density at the time. So of course this building maxed out at like 30 to 25 feet. And that didn't help. And that's sort of, these conditions are sort of set prior of the sort of changing of Compton. So I'm talking about sort of white flight, or sort of the idea that Compton was originally sort of a white suburbia. So the code essentially was sort of addressing that sort of culture. And, after white flight, and then segueing into sort of the conditions that Compton had at the time, there's this want for the revitalization of Compton and sort of growing Compton now post I would say post LA riot or war on drugs, or any sort of other, or redlining, or any sort of other implications that sort of had a very negative impact actually on the progression of Compton. So now if they essentially want to sort of increase these bounding boxes and develop them. So then this is where my thesis comes into play. I'm sort of introducing the zealot as a way to work within the bounding box over the long-term development of specifically Compton. So in the sort of barbershop, I'm looking into a sort of, you could say decades, 5 years, depends on the sort of capacity of building, but I'm looking into sort of expanding the barbershop and incrementally throughout the years, and eventually creating this sort of hair community, with a salon or a school for teaching hair and whatnot. And so basically I'm sort of working on these models and drawings that always reference the box as the original limiter, but the thing that is the ultimate sort of mode of working for the zealot is its sort of zeal, which is that the long-term development of this sort of barbershop or hair school, or whatever you want to really call it, is what's more important. And in order to do that formally, not even just from a formal standpoint, but also within the community standpoint of the sort of barbershop, is to create dynamism inside of these boxes. And the idea of the flatness can only really be addressed when it actually hits at the face of the box. So you can kind of see the barbershop, it's flatter when it hits the box, but anytime it doesn't hit the box, it allows itself to sort of imply new conditions and spatial conditions. So yes. Oh, and then lastly, the next step is to create a second site, which would be a larger building, which is right across from the Compton Courtyard House, actually. So I'm sort of challenging it in that way, which also has an increased bounding box condition. And essentially, I want to increase the density of this bounding box, because currently I'm at 3 for the barbershop, like sort of three buildings. And essentially, I want to see more if you were to increase that size. So thank you.
This is just funny. I remember this a couple years ago. I think it was Krista, you were teaching the 2GA, and one of the go-to projects was the State of Illinois Center by Helmut Jahn.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan.
It shows up on many people's like top 10 lists of important buildings. And
Yeah.
for some reason, then the next semester with 2GB, that was one of the group of buildings. The only two buildings that both studios looked at was that. And thought, this is weird. There's going to be a whole group of students that think this is a really important.
Right. When really just you and I like it, Andrew.
This is funny. That courthouse, Irvin, I don't know if you know, my thesis student Zoe is on here. That architect, which is, what, I don't know what's his name, Zoe, something Allen, like a completely forgettable architect. He designed that and his other courthouse that she's doing a renovation of. So suddenly it's like, this guy's having a revival.
Right, having a revival at SCI-Arc.
Oh gosh. Oh.
She just got a bunch of drawings from the building from the county, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
not of yours, but they're actually, you know, he
Yeah.
didn't have like a wide palette of expression. It's not that different.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
this might be too on the nose, Irvin, but I was thinking, looking at your project, I was thinking about the painter Mark Bradford. He grew up in a hair salon, and he's a famous painter. And he does these kind of an incremental way of painting, and some of his paintings really reflect kind of his idea of city demographics and urban conditions. And he started, there's a real materiality to his painting because he was helping his mom in the hair salon and started using a lot of the material from the hair salon, cotton swabs, all kinds of stuff. And he would build up a layering of color and materiality, and then start pressure washing areas and start getting into this real incremental layered representation. And just thinking about the materiality of your interiors in terms of distinguishing color and texture. These paintings are really beautiful. I'll put his name down, but there's a lot in his arc that's kind of relative to your conversation in terms of materiality.
Hey, Irvin. Long time no see.
Hi. Hope you're doing well.
You too. First, I want to say that like little clips that you put on to like look like these are like pinned up is just like really nice. Like I really like the presentation of this mural board.
Oh, thanks.
It's funny. I feel like, well, because we always presented like next to each other in thesis prep. And I like my project is like a women's issue project. So I feel a lot of kinship, and I feel like I think your project is like taking an interesting take on some of the questions that I have in mind, which is like how does formalism respond to theory? And maybe how do we engage with certain tropes of identity in a way that is both like, for mine at least, it's like, it needs to look like a women's building, but not like, oh, it's pink because it's a women's building.
I see, yeah.
And so those are interesting questions, and I like to see how yours is doing it. I think it would be, I like how it seems to be responding to a kind of like power structure, and specifically like an architectural power structure with zoning and the like allowances of the site. And I almost kind of want the formal response to be like even greater. Like I want to maybe feel that box implied even more. Like I don't know if when it like maybe at certain points like you see the corner of the box, because I can see what you're saying about it feels like it's hitting the box at certain points, but it might be interesting to like exaggerate that even more.
Yeah,
that's looking really cool.
Yeah, that's definitely like, I think for the next site, I was talking to Christy about that. I mean, I said in a way, I said in a version that's maybe myself, but I said I want to go crazier, which is basically what you just said. Yeah, it's something I intend to do. Really emphasize that box, and maybe even surpass it, because it's, again, it's not the essential zeal at this point.
Irvin, I really appreciate your title. I think it's fantastic. The way in which you're taking the word zealot and kind of giving it a very particular architectural, mobilizing it architecturally and saying, this is zealot, sort of the idea of taking action in this site, and how the architecture also becomes a kind of activist move as well to transform the neighborhood. So yeah, I just really appreciate. I think it's like a great ownership of that word, and it's kind of a word that I normally wouldn't hear in architectural discourse, and so it immediately kind of pulls me in, and I start to look. Okay, how does this perform? What is the zealot? What is so? It's I think it's actually a really appropriate title.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Great. I was just thinking, Irvin, Christina's comment on the last project about looking at the rail line, like how LA is trying to change the zoning along the rail lines, is, again, not that we have to have connections from project to project or links of what students are working on, but I mean, that's something that's pretty important for you to kind of think about. Compton has quite a prominent spot along the rail line, and I think you're anticipating that could have a much more impactful change than just maybe the typical formula of gentrification. But I think to maybe the other link would be, I think Christina, I think the idea is, yeah, they want to densify there by going up, and I think like, even though your project is different, Irvin, than the group that went before, I do think you're also saying, well, maybe we don't have to like always fill the box. Maybe we don't always have to fill the zoning box in order to have that, to add density and to add impact in a community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wendy, what? Oh, sorry, go ahead. I can't see who. Go ahead, whoever was going to talk.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Erin. I really like the quality of your illustrations and like how cloudy they are. They really reflect it in your miniature 3D model. And I wonder, I was just wondering what social or zoning or what characteristics are taken into consideration while creating the bounding box, and why are we forcing ourselves to be inside of those self-imposed restrictions?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. Actually, it's something I thought about too while I was continuing the thesis, because it sort of constantly changed, especially in the beginning, on that, specifically on that question. I think I did that. I addressed it by just saying that some people or architects tend to practice, or not all architects, of course, but which is nothing wrong with asserting the bounding box as the object or as the building. So then you sort of get these sort of you essentially work from the box, and then you work out, or you work inward, and then you work within certain conditions. And if there's certain programs that really work for that, like housing, for example, tend to really work for that, because you need to sort of fill in as much as the box as humanly possible, especially in today's time. And then I think that with code, the zealot is something that I address as something that works or evolves and works over time. So it goes down to the reason I even picked Compton, and why it's because Compton's code is sort of evolving every 20 years, based off of, or not even really based off of, but it seems reactive off of events such as sort of large African-American communities moving to Compton. And then you have this sort of war on drugs that sort of imprison a significant number of African Americans in sort of Compton, and et cetera, et cetera. And then Compton then becoming sort of 50% Hispanic. So Compton has seen itself constantly changing in terms of these communities that are in it. And the zoning is no different, essentially. A lot of these buildings that I'm referencing used to just be single family homes. And now they all have a 75-foot cap, so there's a projection that Compton has for itself, which is that this downtown, where I'm referring back to the sort of Federal Courtyard House, is to sort of pinpoint the marker of that height that they seem to really desire, because the limit is now 75 feet. And if most of the buildings are maybe 30 feet, then that's a really significant thing I take into consideration when it comes to working with the box. So I actually see the box not as a limiter, but as an opportunity for sort of, I guess creativity is a word I could think of right now, but you know, it actually provided me more opportunities to create things that I wouldn't necessarily have considered inside the box.
Great. Well, man, I feel like we just get we get started and then like we buzz through our hour. So it was really wonderful to touch. Thank you, Irvin, for closing us out. Thank you to all the students that went today and for those that joined the room. I hope that you guys can, you know, continue some Zoom conversations on the side. I think it always feels kind of close when you know what someone else is thinking about. So, you know, feel free to reach out to each other the way you would by dropping by someone's desk. I know it's only a simulation, but I think it really does help to kind of get notes and of encouragement from your peers. So I would hope you guys are doing that for each other. Super nice to see all of you. Maybe we'll see you at Fridays at 5. Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Great projects, everyone. This is awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.